About inflammation. And this is something that's very near and dear to me because of the experiences that I've had in my life with dealing with autoimmune, namely with multiple sclerosis. And inflammation is something that played a really big part. And understanding the impact that inflammation was having on my body when I was living with multiple sclerosis or MS, and how it was impacting the symptoms I was dealing with and the frequent relapses I was having was something that was really helpful for me in making major shifts in my health. And inflammation has played a really big role in a lot of the clients that we've worked with as well. So, hi, I'm Kate from Align Natural Health, and today we're going to talk about the impact that inflammation has on the body, where it can come from, and we're going to focus for this talk on foods. Inflammation is a really big topic. So it's one that I'm going to get back into next week as well and talk about some other factors. But today's focus is all around foods. And for me, I learned that there are foods and other triggers that can create more inflammation in the body. And the more inflamed I was, the worse I felt. And a lot of the times when we talk with clients, this is something that they can recognize and notice as well. And inflammation can be a driver for many chronic illnesses as well. It's not just for MS, it's not just for autoimmune. If you're dealing with an autoimmune condition, though, which I was told that autoimmune meant that my body was essentially attacking itself. And from the research that I've done and the learning over the last several years, what I've actually learned is it could be more a sign that the body is trying to protect you from something foreign that doesn't belong there. And, you know, this makes a lot of sense in why nutrition changes made a really big deal for me. Because if my body was really just attacking itself, it would have continued to do so and it wouldn't have mattered the changes that I made. But making changes in my diet allowed me to reverse all of the symptoms that I was dealing with. And I no longer live on medication or dealing with any relapses or any of the issues that I had before. And you may or may not know that any condition or any illness that ends in itis, actually means inflammation. So this can be multiple different things if you think about it. For example, arthritis ends in itis. Arthritis is inflammation in the joints. Bronchitis is another one that comes to mind. Bronchitis is inflammation in the respiratory tract, in the lungs, in the bronchioles that go down into your lungs. And then colitis is another condition that many people deal with, or diverticulitis, both of which end in itis, and they are inflammation of the digestive tract. A lot of the times, the solution that's given if you're dealing with, especially if you're having a flare of symptoms with a condition like this, and this was my experience in the past as well, is that my doctor would turn to a steroid medication to help bring the inflammation down and to help deal with the increase in symptoms I was dealing with, which ultimately it would help for the short term, but it wasn't dealing with the cause. It wasn't figuring out why are you dealing with the inflammation that you're dealing with. A steroid is just kind of a band-aid, really. It's just patching up the symptoms, but it's not figuring out why you're dealing with it. What's the cause? What's the trigger for the body? So, why does inflammation happen in the body? As I mentioned today, we're going to talk about food, but inflammation is a protective response from the body, and it's actually trying to help you. But when inflammation is chronically high, the body isn't going to be able to do what it's supposed to do. You're not going to sleep properly. It's not going to be able to recharge, repair, or heal the way it should be. And so, this is when our health actually suffers in the long run. So, what causes inflammation? This is a pretty big question. We'll talk more about some lifestyle factors next week. But today we're going to focus on foods and the most common ones that cause problems for people. And these were all ones that were problematic for me as well. And what I found was that making changes to the way I was eating, the way I was doing things, made a really big difference. So there are five main triggers from my experience and that I've seen with clients as well. And some of these, may not be a problem for some people and they are for others, but these are really common ones. So the five main ones are gluten, dairy, processed seed oils, which is something that hasn't been talked about that much over the last probably 50 years, but it's becoming more in the spotlight recently. Refined sugar. I'm sorry. I was going to talk all about sugar today, and then I realized it's Valentine's Day. So I'll save that for another day for you. But refined sugar is something that can be inflammatory for people, and then alcohol. So we'll get a little bit more into those. Gluten is the first one I mentioned. And gluten, this is more specifically the gluten that you find in North America. A lot of the times, people who are sensitive to gluten or who have issues with gluten are able to go to Europe, and all of a sudden they can eat bread, they can eat all kinds of gluten containing things and have no issues with it. And this is because in North America, we have different regulations and different standards than they do in Europe when it comes to the pesticides that are sprayed on these products. And gluten, a lot of the times, if you have a sensitivity to it or an intolerance to gluten, it can actually be glyphosate, which is the pesticide that's very heavily sprayed and very heavily present on gluten and on gluten containing grains. So this can cause inflammation for people, and it can cause an increase in intestinal permeability. So what this means, our gut lining, so our intestines, are one cell thick. And these cells are held together by what are called tight junctions. So essentially, the body has the system set up where it's trying to hold these cells close together because you do want some things to pass through your system, but we don't want big undigested food particles or bacteria or parasites to pass through our gut system because then it's going to end up in our bloodstream and in other parts of our body. And so when we have inflammation in the gut, like gluten, it causes permeability, which means that suddenly this digestive tract that's otherwise kept pretty secure is not able to hold those tight junctions holding the cells together. So we can have gaps form between the cells. So if you picture the cells are normally close together, and then you have the gluten or the intestinal inflammation causing a weakness in that bind between the two cells, suddenly there's a gap and more things can go in between. And that's where we can deal with things like autoimmune or things like food sensitivities because those aren't meant to be in your bloodstream. And so the body's like, doesn't know what to do with it and can start to attack. The next one I mentioned was dairy. So conventional dairy can be difficult for people to digest. It can be full of hormones and it can be full of antibiotics. And a lot of this is done, the farmers want to keep the cows sick so that or keep the cows healthy so that they can produce more dairy, or it's given hormones so that it produces more dairy so they get more yield. But ultimately, these are passing over into our dairy products. So if you're consuming cheese and yogurt and milk, ultimately you're consuming those products that are given to the cows. So the hormones and the antibiotics as well. And the saying, "We are what our food eats." If they're eating glyphosate treated grass, you're going to get some of that in the conventional dairy as well. So that can be harmful for some people and can be inflammatory. It can also be damaging to the gut because of the hormones and the antibiotics that are built up in the cows. Number 3 was the processed seed oils. This is industrial seed oils. So this is things like canola oil, like soybean oil, corn, cottonseed, safflower. They're all hydrogenated. They're all highly inflammatory and they become rancid really quickly. So these oils are really sensitive and they damage quickly when they're exposed to light, heat, or air. And so this is why if you go to Costco and you see like there's the giant bottles of canola oil or the giant bottles of the oils, a lot of the times they're in a plastic container, which is see-through. So light can come through there, which is not ideal. Storing anything in plastic is not ideal to begin with when it comes to food or when it comes to beverages because the plastic will leach into whatever you're consuming. But it's the clear bottle that's problematic here because the light will cause the oil to become rancid or damaged. Air as well. So that's where the really big Costco bottle is a problem because how many times are you going to open that before it's done? Many times. And so it's getting exposed to air every time you open it. And then heat can be a problem too because we don't know how long have these things been sitting on the shelves at Costco? Have they been exposed to any heat? What was delivery like to get them to your house? So these seed oils are going to be more commonly damaged or problematic for people than if you went with like an olive oil or a butter or a ghee. Number 5? I lost track. Number 5 was alcohol. So alcohol is also one that can inflame the stomach lining and it can cause nutrient malabsorption. So alcohol is one I know it's something that's not the easiest to give up, especially I mean, it's February right now, but in the summer, alcohol is a common thing, or food for a lot of us has become a very social thing. So you go out with people and you have a few beverages, and I get that. But ultimately, these are things that are not going to be beneficial to your gut. And when I made the choice that I didn't want to be on medication anymore with the MS because I wasn't getting any better, ultimately my quality of life was getting worse. And I found out that food could be something I could use to help myself get better. I removed all of these things at first. And that's a really big undertaking for some to think of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you can get started if you're looking to make some healthier changes to the foods that you're eating. So we talked about gluten, dairy, processed seed oils, refined sugar. I didn't mention refined sugar. That's why I was confused that alcohol wasn't, it is number 5, but refined sugar is very inflammatory. And that's going to feed the bad gut bacteria, which is not ideal either. And the more we feed these guys, the more they want to be fed. So this is the problem that people can have when they start to remove sugar from their diet is that our gut bacteria and the parasites in our system and other bugs in our system can ultimately control the actions that we take and the way we feel. And so when you start to remove sugar, this is why I don't recommend removing it cold turkey because you're going to go through a battle if you've been consuming a lot of sugar because the bugs that are living in your system are like, what? Hold on. The supply chain is dried up. So it's going to be much harder on your system. So this is where taking small steps is really helpful. So we talked about gluten, dairy, processed seed oils, refined sugar, and alcohol. And ultimately, processed foods is really kind of going to contain all of these. And that's where there's a problem there. If you remember what I said about the body trying to protect you from things that are foreign or things that it doesn't know what to do with, processed foods, especially highly processed foods, pretty much fall right into that category. Technically, pretty much all foods are processed to some degree, if you think about it. Unless you're going out into your garden and picking something off the plant and eating it, um, anything's going to be processed. But the goal is to look for things that are minimally processed. Highly processed foods are ones that are filled with chemicals and toxins, things like artificial colors, artificial flavors, sweeteners, MSG, preservatives, and genetically modified ingredients, and even plastics can be in our food system, especially if you're consuming lots of highly processed options. Okay, so what can you do? Depending on how you're currently eating, even small changes can make a big difference, but it's good to understand that, like, even a small change is worth it. It can feel like you're not doing a huge difference to yourself, but every little bit that you do is gonna make a difference for your body. A good first step is to do a quantum nutrition consultation with us because then we can help you figure out what's going on in your body. We can find if there's foods that your body does not like and is not responding well to. Because if you're consuming foods that your system is not responding well to, you're not going to be able to heal. And if your body's not able to heal, you're not going to be able to get into back into balance, and you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. So that's one of the things we test for with quantum nutrition testing. We test, is food the problem? Is food the reason you're having the arthritis? Is food the reason that you're having the headaches? Is food the reason that you're having crazy heavy periods? All of these could be a factor. It also could be things like the chemicals and toxins that I mentioned. It could be lead or mold. It could be heavy metals. There's so many different things that we test for to figure out what's going on with you and why you're dealing with the symptoms that you're dealing with. So quantum nutrition testing would be a very good first step for you. You can reach out to me anytime if that's something you're interested in learning more about. I don't know, I can't talk today. Um, but from a very basic perspective, focusing on adding more real whole foods to your diet is a really great place to start. This means single ingredient foods, foods that don't need a nutrition label. So, an apple, what's the ingredients in an apple? An apple. Steak, the ingredients is steak or beef. And when it comes to healthy fats, we want to work to switch to cooking with unrefined cooking oils. So that's going to be more animal based stuff, as well as avocado oil. So it could be avocado oil, it could be coconut oil, it could be grass fed butter, it could be ghee. All of these are going to be better options. They're not going to be as highly processed as the seed oil, and they're not going to be as inflammatory. And I like to focus on when we're looking at making changes, focus on the foods that you can add. There are so many wonderful foods that you can be eating. And when we focus on what's available for me, what can I have, rather than focusing on the things that you're not eating anymore, it's really helpful because it creates a more positive reference. When I decided to make the changes, so what I cut out all grains, I cut out all dairy, I cut out all sugar, all processed foods, um, all legumes. I wasn't much of a cook when I first started making changes, but for me, I had this really big motivation because I didn't want to live on MS medication for the rest of my life. I didn't want that quality of life or that lack of quality of life anymore. So the motivation was really high. So, being able to make those massive changes, was it easy? No, it wasn't easy. But when motivation is really high, it's easier to get ourselves to do really big things. For most people, it's going to be more sustainable and more achievable to focus on making little changes. So, like I said, focusing on what are the foods I can have? What are the things that I can enjoy? What are the things that I'm eating now? Well, what is something that's a real whole food option that I could have instead? And it's not about changing everything that you're eating. It's, what if you look at one meal a day and think, what is one small change that I can make to start working towards moving to a healthier options? So, real whole foods. So, that's going to be the outer rim of your grocery store. The bakery doesn't count. Sorry. So like the produce section, the fresh meat section, the fresh seafood section, and looking for the minimally processed options if you are consuming things like cheese or other foods that are slightly processed. It's going to be better than going for things that have like 35 ingredients on the label. And start slow. And every small change that you make towards, eating healthier, towards doing things that are better for your body will make a really big difference. And when it comes to the sugar, as I mentioned, if you're someone who's used to eating sugar a lot of the time, there is going to be a period where your body is going to be you're going to have cravings when you start to remove it. And that's why I don't recommend removing it cold turkey. It's just a little bit at a time. And over time, as the body gets used to your new way of eating and gets used to eating real whole foods, they taste amazing. If you're used to eating really highly processed stuff, at first it can taste bland. It can taste, not as exciting as what you're used to. But over time, it becomes so much more flavorful, so much more tasty, and the processed stuff kind of starts to taste like crap. I definitely found that in the past too. I cut out sugar and then I'd go somewhere and it was like a friend's birthday or whatever, and I'd have a little piece of cake just to kind of um, treat myself, I guess. And my taste buds were so offended because it was so sweet. So over time, your body will start to crave the things that are good for you, and you'll start to see a difference in how you feel, in how you sleep, in your energy, in your mental clarity, in so many different things in your daily life. So hopefully this was helpful for you. If you know anyone who's struggling and who could use support, I hope you'll share this. And if you're looking for support as well, reach out to us anytime. I'll drop the link in the comments below so you can book your initial consultation with us. We have a sale on for this month, the month of February. It's $135. Regular price on our initial consult bundle is $200, so it's a pretty good savings right now. And you can message me anytime if you have questions as well. Hope you have a wonderful day. Oh, I have a whole bunch of questions. I totally missed it. I'm so sorry. No. Well, I'll reply to all you who commented, on the Facebook Live. I'll reply to you in comments. So if you have any other questions, please leave them there, and for sure, I'll reply to you there. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.